Hello.
Hi there. How you doing?
All right. How are you?
Great. Where are you at this afternoon?
Nashville, Tennessee.
Music, a real music city. They consider that the music city, or is that more like Memphis?
No, it's considered the music that there's all kinds of like billboards, and Nashville calls itself Music City for sure.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've been there, maybe 26, 27 years ago. I love it there. It's just what a great community. I've been talking with a lot of people from Nashville on my podcast here.
Yeah, Nashville's probably if you haven't been here in that long, it's changed a lot. It's one of the it cities. Like 100 families a day move here. It's
Wow.
crazy. It's really growing.
Really good creative community, and it's not like your New York or your LA's. It's really hard to get around there and to meet people and to be in the community. So I heard it's very supportive there, and all different genres. It's beyond country and western.
Yeah, you don't hear about the other genres very much, but it definitely is beyond. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, good recording studios there and everything. So starting from the top, how did you get started on all of those?
You mean interested in music or in the career aspect of it?
Your interest in music growing
Oh,
up.
my interest in music. I grew up in a family. My dad was a rugby player, but he was very interested in music. Couldn't play anything, couldn't sing, couldn't do anything, but just loved it. He's the guy that could have told you like who played bass on Manfred Mann's 1965 minor hit. He was just really into it. Um, so I kind of grew up. The rugby team would do security for rock concerts. And so I grew up kind of backstage and all that sort of stuff. And then my dad took me when I was a young child to see Purple Rain. Not appropriate for a child to see, but
No.
he took me to see it. And at the end, when Prince played Purple Rain, I just remember thinking how that made me feel, and I wanted to make other people feel that way. Like that was really the main. That's when I decided it went from being something that was around and the family was interested in to me going, I want to be able to do that.
Yeah, Prince definitely inspired a lot of people. I remember he was just so different, and I knew about 1999 and all of that, but when Dove's Cry came out, I was like, "What is this? This is just different." I never heard anything like that on
Right.
radio. It just was hooked. I had to run out and get that single.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Purple
love
Rain.
that. I actually have, I don't know if you can see it. That is Purple
Wow.
Rain tattooed on my arm. So I'm a huge Prince fan.
Oh, wow. I did a story on a guy who makes mic stands, and Prince was one of his biggest clients, and he did it
Oh
in
wow.
that symbol. Yeah, very, very neat.
Wow.
This guy does mic stands for a lot of other clients too. I think even Robert Plant was one of the people who he's done it for. So, and he's also in a Van Halen cover band. So it's
Oh, that's cool.
yeah, really neat story. But yeah, that's great that somebody like that had inspired you to continue on. So, learning how to sing instruments, how did that come about for you?
That was the more traditional, like just school. My first instrument was, I remember being in fourth grade and they'd be like, you can pick an instrument. And I was like, well, I want to play guitar. And they're like, well, you can't pick that in school. Like, you got to pick an instrument we have. And I was like, what do you have that rock bands have? And they're like, drums. And so my first instrument was drums. I ended up picking that. I played drums all through school, all through high school. I actually didn't start singing until high school. And I was joined the choir. And so I was the typical band geek, choir nerd. That I was that guy. Um, and then when I just found fellow musicians and started playing around locally in rock bands, and so, but it started just through school, through which is why I'm also a big advocate for music education in school. I mean, I definitely was a kid that could have been lost in the shuffle if it weren't for music education formally coming through the school system.
Yeah, that's really big. And it's just beyond, if you do music and you don't have to do it professionally later in life, it's good mind exercise, and it should definitely be supported in our schools. It's not just like goofy arts. It's actually good for your whole enrichment.
Yeah, the studies show that it helps with problem solving. I mean, it's
Right.
really big in problem solving. It helps in other careers. So it's not that you have to be. It's like professional or bust. And music's a weird thing too because you know this because you interview people all the time. But the general public thinks it's Adele, Taylor Swift,
Right.
or you failed. So music is one of the careers, the few careers you can be like, hey, I've got an average life, I got an average home, I put my kids through college, and I've been a musician, and they'll say, "Oh, hang in there, you'll make it someday." I'm like, well, if I were a plumber and I just told you everything I did, that I've got a retirement fund, just like everyone, you would say you're a very successful plumber. Great, congratulations. But because I'm a musician and not everyone has heard of me, I've not been in the zeitgeist of the entire world. People think, oh, well, hang in there, buddy. It's like, no, I'm fine. I do okay at this, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's, I don't know if those talent shows are ever really helped with this, but the general view in the public is like, yeah, you got to get past the Simon Cowell,
Right.
and then that will make you successful. And that's the only path. But there's so much other stuff in the music industry, as you do engineering. So it's like there's so many other jobs where you're producing that stuff. And it's not just being the up and front lead singer and trying to have your name in lights.
Right. Right. And that's, I mean, I've all but 4 years of my professional career from high school on, I've made a living in music. I mean, and so whether that's not always doing the same thing. I've done everything from sing jingles for pharmacies, which is not glamorous work, to European tours where I'm the artist, to being a music business professor. I mean, it's to writing a song for other people. I mean, but I've been connected to music for all but 4 years of my professional career. And so to me, that's a success. I mean, and I've, not been, I'm certainly not rich, but I'm not destitute either. I mean, so, there's just a lot of things. It's not just super famous or you failed.
Absolutely. It's way beyond that, taking the mic and having everybody staring at you from the audience. So going through school, did you get a post high school education? Where did you go for that?
I actually have 5 degrees.
Wow. Yeah, I noticed a doctor is on the,
Yeah.
on the Zoom call here.
So I just kept sort of going to school. I first got a excuse me, music performance degree. And then after that, I got business management. And then I got an MBA. And then I got a doctorate in leadership. And then I've just finished a master's in philosophy as well. So
Wow. It's a lot of education there. That's fantastic.
and it's not like I'm not smart. I'm just curious. That's what I always tell people. You just got to be curious. You don't have to be smart.
Right. I mean, that's all part of what we do here. And I do as my podcast and doing reporting and journalism. It's just about really being just curious, just work hard at it and, being very dedicated to it as well. That's really where you find that sweet spot. And your happiness really comes into play with that too.
Yeah. And I find too that the more curious I am and the more education I receive, whether it's formal or informal, the better I'm able to handle nuance, which seems to be, and it doesn't matter what side of any issue you fall on, because the whole world is polarized at this point. But the
Mhm.
more you know, and the more you can understand the nuance of the other side. And even if you go, I completely disagree with that, but I understand how you got to that conclusion. And it seems to it sounds weird, but the more knowledge you have, the more understanding you could be of someone. Not that you have to like bend your principles or morals, but you can at least understand other people. And where everyone sort of runs to their corners, my answer is usually like, you probably just need to read a little more. So you probably just need
Yeah.
to and just be a little more curious, and you'll figure out like you have some common ground with that other person that you would never think you would have common ground with.
Oh, we need to so get back to doing. Oh, I don't know if we were ever really there, but it seems like we've been lurching to divisiveness for the last 4 decades,
Yeah.
and we're just in very strange times, especially with the pandemic never helped, and what's been going on in Washington and around the world. It's just like none of this has been helping. But
Right.
that's what it takes is that we should be able to listen and understand, and even if you agree to disagree, we could all move on, and we're all members of the on this globe.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
So your recording career, how long have you been doing it now? You have your 11th studio album out now?
It's actually the press release says that, but it's actually our 12th. It's our 12th studio album. I think that was just a little faux pas, but it's our 13th album overall, our
Mm.
12th studio record. We had a live from the Middle East. We did a tour of the Middle East with Armed Forces. But I've been doing it recording. So I um, got out of college with my first degree, slept on floors, ate pizza, that whole thing, and got signed, moved to Nashville. That kind of fell apart, became like a writer for a while. and then started another band and got signed there. And so this is sort of my third entity. I've been doing the recording thing for 25 years.
Hmm. What a catalog. Yeah, that's a nice amount there to have in the vault. So yeah,
Yeah.
very impressive.
And now what's funny is that it's passed on. So I have children that are grown that grew up around it. And one of my sons is a music minister at a church, and the other one is a recording artist for Tooth and Nail, which is like a emo hardcore, like a heavy music label, which isn't exactly my thing, but just showing like it's been passed down. And then my daughter is a music theater major, and my daughter-in-law is a choir director at a middle school. So the music thing has been passed down, and is now like second generation making a living at it. So
Yeah, that's I was reading about that, and just on this new release, you got it's some family involved in this. Your daughter-in-law, Juliana, is and I've listened to your whole album. It's just really amazing. This track called Freedom.
yeah.
And yeah, what a great wall of sound, of backup singers you have.
Yeah, and that was some friends of mine. It's a band in Memphis, a choir group called Kairos, and they did all the choir stuff for that, which is really great. But yeah, my daughter is Akira, and my daughter-in-law Juliana did a lot of the background vocals. My sons did some of the background vocals, although my son Zeke didn't do any of the background vocals after his contract was signed because that would have been a faux pas. So officially, he didn't do any vocals after he signed his contract. That's our story, and we're sticking with it. Uh, but no, a lot of family involved, and the album we had in 2020, me and my son Zion, my other son, wrote a song on it. And yeah, it was just great to have family involved, and especially since they're really good and I don't have to pay them. So I always pull the "you owe me, I don't have to pay you," right?
This is the glory of being on that record, and it's just getting out there. So when was this release? We're pretty recent on this release.
Yeah, March 18th was when the album came out.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. And it's 16 tracks. And
It is 16 tracks and a radio edit. So technically it'll say 17, but one's just a radio edit of a song that has, the label felt far too many solos in it. So
so you're all lyrics on this album, and did you come up with all the melodies? You just work that out when you're, in the recording session.
yeah, I write all the lyrics and all the melodies. I write most of the music, although Sam Burse, who played guitar on it, like the song Freedom, he wrote most of the music for Freedom. That was mostly him. And Crossover, he and I wrote the music together. There's several of them that we did together, but I'm always the melody and the lyrics are all me.
Yeah, crossover's got some really deep lyrics that I was noticing when I cross over. Like, there'll be no fear. How did it come to like coming up with the lyrics for this? Did it come to you pretty quick, or did this take a lot of time for you to iron all that out?
It was really interesting. For a long time I was uninspired with the lyrics. So I didn't start for a long time. Once I started, it was all pretty much done in like a 4 to 6 week period. So once it started, it sort of flowed out. Found like Crossover, I was really inspired by some of the like slave spirituals, because they all had like these double entendre meanings, right? So they had the obvious like transcendent meaning where they were talking about God and heaven, but then they had this underneath meaning of like just themes like freedom and oppression and sort of encouragement here. And then some of them even had a third layer where they actually gave directions for escaped slaves for where to meet, for the Underground Railroad. So like Wade in the Water is an example of like the song actually has a third level of meaning where it actually has an escape route written in the lyrics. So I found that like those layers really powerful and fascinating, and just genius, to be honest. And so, I wanted to, with Crossover particularly, I wanted to sort of tap into those sort of themes, because now we're not really, and obviously being, I'm not trying to steal something that I didn't go through. So I'm not trying to put myself in that position, or sort of take from that. But now we're talking about more freedom, like, because people are talking about like neurological neuroscience of like, do we have free will? And so in a way, there's a discussion of are humans even having free will? But the repercussion of that is I'm no longer me if I don't have free will. And so, sort of taking that sort of slave spiritual narrative of, yes, it is about God. Yes, it is about transcendence, but it's also about like freedom is connected to who I am. Like that is connected to the sense of self, is that I have to have free will.
Mm, that is really deep. And then speaking of being so deep, with your philosophy degree and everything, you have a book coming out. Is it coming out later this year?
Yeah, it's at the editor now. So when that gets done being edited, I have no idea, but I'm hoping sooner than later. But yeah, it's just deconstructing a disciple's doubt is what it's called. And it's just how wrestling with doubt and how the deconstruction process, um, kind of on both sides of the issue, gets this really negative view. So some people are like, oh, if you deconstruct your worldview, then you're just abandoning everything your parents told you and you're just throwing caution to the wind. And that's not necessarily true. We deconstruct all the time. Anytime we change our mind on something, or we even learn something new, we're technically deconstructing a worldview we previously held. I mean, that's why, um, most people don't put leeches on their body anymore to like solve diseases. Like
Right.
we deconstructed from that belief. At the same time, the other side is like, oh, you have to deconstruct from everything because you're being indoctrinated. But the thing is, everyone's indoctrinated. If
Mm.
if you think that the toothpaste should be removed from the toothpaste tube a certain way, then you're indoctrinated. If you think the toilet paper should be rolled a certain way, you're indoctrinated. If you think ketchup does not go on hot dogs, I mean, these are silly examples, but everyone is indoctrinated. You can only choose what you're indoctrinated by, not whether or not you are indoctrinated, because we have to be indoctrinated to have a worldview, and human beings have to have a worldview to function.
Wow, that's amazing. I never thought about that. Like, yeah, yeah, everything's indoctrination. It's like, yeah, you never ever do that. Well, why not? Why can't I
Right.
just go against that grain? But the way you're raised or the way you're thinking, it's always influenced by that. And we, as we get older, I think we get more set in our ways that way as
Yeah.
to what we were indoctrinated with.
Right.
I
Right.
didn't
And
really
so the
think
thing
about
is, with everyone accuses everyone else of indoctrinating, but so when
that.
people
Right.
ask me, it's like, are you indoctrinating your kids? Yeah, I assume so, because I'm teaching them stuff that I think is right. I mean, I'm teaching them, even down to like our interests. I mean, my kids ended up being musicians. Well, they ended up being musicians because they were around it. I indoctrinated them into that. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I don't feel bad about that. I teach them the best way I know to live, and then they can take, and some of that they'll deconstruct from, and they'll change their mind. They'll be like, dad, you're wrong. Other parts of it they'll keep, but that's all a part of just having a human experience of life.
That's so funny because it's like what you're doing. And it's not so much you would call it glamorous or whatever, but it's definitely a lot more dynamic than saying, hey, not to knock plumbers or somebody who does the everyday jobs, but what you're doing is like kind of fascinating to a kid. Hey, if you're banging away on drums, it's like they're more apt to get onto that than say, oh yeah, I think I would now want to get into doing plumbing or something. Not to knock that, but
Right.
it definitely is a little bit more fascinating. So it's no wonder that you have family getting into music as well.
Yeah, even the little guys, he's got his own drum channel and he's doing like Led Zeppelin covers, and he's only 8. And so, um, but we try to, we have these interests, like deep conversations in the family. And then like, I'm really into basketball. And so all of my male children play basketball. Not that I'm against my female, but when my daughter, we put her in basketball one season, and when she clapped anytime anyone scored, we thought maybe she's not competitive. Maybe that's not her thing. She's like, yay, the other team scored. It's like, well, it's not exactly what we're supposed. You're supposed to try to win, but she's like, oh, I don't care about winning. I just want everyone. It's like, okay, well, maybe this isn't for you. And she ended up going into theater, and that's her thing. So
Good. Good. No, she's been in plays, musicals in the Nashville area.
she has, and she is by far the best singer in the family. So, and the song "When I'm Gone" on the record, that's her and my daughter-in-law trading back and forth. But the more like wail, super high stuff, that's my daughter doing that stuff.
Okay. I hear a little bit of falsetto on this track called Paperback Novels. Is that kind of a Prince influence?
Absolutely,
You're talking
absolutely.
about that?
When I learned to sing, I was just mimicking people, and the two people I kind of mimicked the most, not that I'm as good as either one of them, was Prince and Michael Hutchence from NXS.
Oh yeah.
So those are my two biggest vocal influences.
Yeah, that's when, and very understandable too. Just mesmerizing. I love those two singers. You know, going back into the 80s, and they're not with us anymore. I never thought I'd see the day where they wouldn't be with us. It's just very strange in my generation seeing those who I had followed in the 80s. That I would see them, not be here anymore. It's
Right.
that's the biggest, the saddest thing about all of that. Such talent too.
Yeah, I think for me, it's affecting a lot of people my age, of having to face our mortality. Because as you
Right.
see, like Tom Petty and Prince and these people die, you're like, oh, they're not going to be here forever. They are getting older, and it's almost like you don't realize it because you freeze them in time. Like I still see Prince, like in the Kiss video when he's like 28 at that time. Like I froze him there when really he was 57, and now he would be in his mid 60s. If he were alive, even if you're alive, you'd be like, oh, he's getting older now. Like that. What is it? They say time is undefeated. It always wins.
Yeah, they were all so young though, and those who we had followed in the 80s and going back. I saw Michael Jackson live once. I still, it hits me every now and then, like he's been gone now for well over a decade. Tom Petty's been gone for a long time now. Whitney Houston, all these people, it's like all died too young. Of course, it's a crazy business, and that height of fame does get to people, and it's a huge lesson in all of that.
Right. Right.
Totally. Another great track, Unified. How did that one come about?
That came about honestly because one of my interests is church history. I find it very fascinating. And so the verses are just the Apostles' Creed. And there's so much, like I said, everything is polarized. Politics are polarized, um, life is polarized, but even church is polarized and people fighting about
Mhm.
this and that. But the Apostles' Creed was here's what we can agree on. We all agree on this. And beyond that, let's be unified. And so it just kind of came from the church history of that. I'm really fascinated. I'm a history buff. My wife gets so annoyed. She's like, you will watch some documentary about how a train spilled oil in Pennsylvania on a Thursday in 1852, and I'm like, because I find it fascinating. But that song really came from an interest in church history and how doctrine sort of formed, and it formed not lightly. They fought about it. There's a story of the real Saint Nicholas, the real punched another bishop out for like saying something that was blasphemous or something. I find that fascinating. Like, and so then Constantine threw him in jail, and it's all kinds of. So that song really came from my love of history and just boiling things down to what can be agreed upon, even with amongst like within Christendom, religious infighting there.
Yeah, yeah. So, in the recording of your albums, where do you do this in Nashville? Do you know people who run studios, or do you got equipment at home when you put it together?
Well, we don't record in Nashville very often. We record a lot in Memphis. And
Hmm.
then my best friend from high school is the recording engineer at Murray State University. And so we've done some albums with him. In fact, this album we recorded with him. And then we had the engineer who we worked with on the last few albums in Memphis mix it. So we sort of blended the processes together. So the vast majority of our albums have been recorded in Memphis,
Hmm.
but a couple albums, three have been recorded in Murray. And this time we combined them. We recorded in Murray, but we mixed them in Memphis. Now, overdubs, we do at my house where I'm sitting. There's a vocal booth right there. And
Well,
so we'll do a lot of the overdubs at my house.
fascinating. And through the pandemic, I've been talking to a lot of artists who like they trade files, and there's it's all files being shot all over the place. We're recording so much differently these days. So the process is really fascinating with our technology.
Yeah, in fact, we did a covers record last year because we recorded one last thing in 2019, but we wanted to wait to release it until the pandemic was, not that we're over it, but at least we're hoping we're getting towards the backside of it so we could properly promote the record. So then that left us with this gap. And so we ended up doing a covers record, which I've always wanted to do. We reimagined all these covers and we did that, recorded it at my house. We recorded it right here. So almost everything was done right here in my house for that record.
Interesting. You have some horn sections on this. Where are the horns being done? Is that because people in Memphis because they're known for having horn sections?
We actually did for one last thing. We did the horns in Murray. but it
Yeah,
is live horns. It's not computer programmed. It's real horns really playing.
a lot of funky feeling throughout all of this too. This isn't just your regular like religious type experience. It's really catchy. You have a lot of funky stuff, especially on the track called Promises. It
Yeah.
just feels so good and it really moves. I mean, you could really just go through this record and just like really feel like this is really uplifting. It's very bouncy. Was that your original intention going into this?
The funkiness, yeah, for sure. I mean, just being a Prince fan, I have a wide variety of influences. So my two favorite artists of all time, I say I love all the Nelsons. And what I mean is Willie Nelson and Prince, because
Mm.
Prince's last name was Nelson. And then, like I said, in excess and Michael Hutchins. But I'm very influenced by like Southern American music. So folk, gospel, funk, blues, and I think you can hear all of that in my stuff. And as, now I will say the intention of things though was we didn't really realize we were making a joyful record until we were about halfway in it.
Yeah, yeah,
But I feel like we were drawn to hope because you had the not that not that presidential elections aren't always contentious, but this last one was particularly contentious. I think we can agree, no
oh
matter
yeah.
what side anyone's on, things were tense, right? And then you had the pandemic, pretty tense. And then you have everything from even now, things like going on with Ukraine and Russia. I really felt like people didn't want I didn't want personally my entertainment to be a bummer right now. Uh, and so about
Mm.
halfway through the record, I realized I was writing a really joyful, uplifting record. And so we just leaned into it. And I said, I want to be, if hope is a drug, I want to be Pablo Escobar. I want to
Yeah,
be the
yeah.
the cartel of hope. And so we did after that point, after we kind of discovered we're already in it, we just leaned all the way into it. And let's just make a really joyful, uplifting record. And Promises is a great example. It's a song about being a good dad and a good husband. And people are like, it's kind of cheesy. I'm like, actually, that's might be the most rock and roll thing you can do right now.
Yeah.
Because just saying I've made these promises and I'm going to be a good dad. I brought this child into the world. I owe him that. I owe him
Yeah.
my and the same with my wife. I owe her my faithfulness. I promise that. That's one of the things we do. When if you get married, you go, I promise not to go do that. So that's why I was like, okay, we're gonna stick with. So even that song, but I really wanted to be careful not to be overly preachy about it. Just sort of talking about I just wanted to convey hope and inject life into people. If that makes
Yeah.
sense.
You always have to be careful, yeah, when you're doing that. Like I don't want to be preachy. That's kind of a hard thing to come out of that and saying, "Hey, I'm not backing out of this. This is like I'm making these promises, and I'm sticking with that." So it's very deep. I don't think it's really being preachy. It's a good philosophical type argument song.
Right.
Definitely. Another one, Song of Songs. It's got some like, is this kind of raunchy-ish a little bit there? Let me taste the wine in your mouth.
It is, and I did that for. I'm glad you asked about that. No one's asked about that song yet, so I appreciate that. My wife
Yeah.
is a therapist, so she is very open about that sort of stuff.
Nice to have a therapist in the house, right?
It is, it is. Except like when we get into intense discussions and she says things like, now where do you think that comes from? And I'm like, don't do that to me. Like, not to me. You can do that to other people. I'm not paying you money. So no, it is a couple things. Often Christendom gets accused of being very uptight, particularly sexually. But the book
Hmm.
Song of Songs is about a newly married couple being very graphic and celebratory in their physical affection for one another. And so I decided to write a song. And every line from that lyric, it's probably the most biblical song on the whole record because every line is taken directly from scripture. And was I being a little bit daring people to say that it's inappropriate? I am. I am. Because if you're going to say it's inappropriate, particularly from people coming from a religious viewpoint, they're going to say it's inappropriate. It's like, well, it's in the book, so it's right there. So yeah, I really think I I make no bones about the fact that I am a sexual being, and
Hmm.
I enjoy that, and I enjoy that with my wife, and
Huh.
I have no problems talking about that. Now, would I perform that song at noon at a kids fair? We'll probably skip that one. We'll probably skip over that one. But if the context is right, I enjoy, I'll enjoy performing that. I say that I hope people there maybe there's some births 9 months from now because a couple listened to that song. I'd be happy if that happened.
Mission accomplished, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
fantastic. No, I mean, it's something that, like, maybe in a certain context, Prince could have written something like that. It sounds like that's something he would come up with, those kind of lines. So,
And
yeah, why
I
not?
can't deny that my Prince influence probably leaned into that song as well, too, musically and lyrically.
Oh, totally, totally. And you kind of slow it down on the song called Lighthouse.
Yeah.
I like that variety. You have so much funk, and then you kind of, okay, Lau, let's slow it down here. So how did that one? How were you inspired on that to put a more slower song on there?
Yeah, well, we have like the funk side and the blues side. But we also have like the folk side. Like I love acoustic guitar. Like I said, I love Willie Nelson. Um, but as far as like this song, and this happens to me occasionally, that chorus melody for Lighthouse, I dreamt. And so I woke up in the middle of the night and all the lyrics and all the melody were there. So I usually keep my phone and I'll go in the bathroom so I don't wake up my wife, and I'll sing it into it. And then the next day, and it's really just a song giving advice to my young son. That's all it really is. It's a his older brothers. I wrote them a whole book, and I got like mentors in their life to write them a book, and it's called the like the book of manhood, and it's not published. It's just for them. But I thought like I plan on being around when he's older, but I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. So I wrote that song for him, and just saying, basically, you can depend on me. That here's some advice, and you can depend on that. And so the chorus, I dreamt it. It all came to me all at once.
And great, it comes in your dreams. That could really just help you with your career and your projects. It's like, oh, I just dreamt that. But how do you get that onto paper? Do you immediately run over to your phone, put the thoughts down in there, and like, we got some
Yeah,
melody?
I have to immediately do it because if I go back to sleep, it will not be there in the morning. So,
Yeah, that takes quite a discipline too. It's like, especially when you're half out of it. It's like, what are you doing? Oh, I got lyrics here. Wait a minute.
well, my wife has gotten used to it. At first, she was like, "What are you doing? You're going back down." I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to go back downstairs. I got to go." Now she's just like, "Okay," and she just rolls over and goes back to sleep. She pays no mind to it anymore. She's used to it.
Yeah, you come up with a line, no matter where you fit on the team, you're my MVP. I love that. That's a great line. It's like, I'm sure, like, it's like, you got to get that down.
Yeah, and that line came from really this song. I gave no thought to an audience. It's really just written to him because we're a basketball family, and his older brothers, particularly one who's a music minister now, was
Hmm.
particularly gifted at basketball. And I wanted to let my young son know you don't have to compare to him. Like you don't have to be your brother. You don't have
Hmm.
to be as good as your brother. Wherever you are, you're my favorite player. And one of the things I tell my son every night is I'll ask him, I'll say, who's my favorite little boy in the whole world? And he'll say, I am. And I just want him to know that he does not have to compare to anybody, that he's my favorite little boy in the world. Now, I mean, I'm also one like, I tell him my love is unconditional, my approval is not. We often tell kids like I'm always approving of my kids. I'm not. There are times I don't approve of that behavior. I don't approve of the way you spoke to your mother, but my love is unconditional. And him being holding the place of being my favorite little boy in the world is unconditional.
Hmm. It's very good. Very good. You got a cast of good characters on this new project. I'm hearing a little bit of a Billy Preston influence with your keyboard player. Is that Barry Strausser
It
who's
is.
all over your record? This is how did you guys come to meet and be included in on this project?
Well, Barry and I have been playing together for 12 years. Simply, I took an ad out for a keyboard player, and he answered it. There's no like fancy story, but we've been playing together in the band ever since. And he's been the longest tenured member, and Billy Wright, the bass player, is the second longest. He's been with us 11 years. So the three of us are the core. But yeah, Barry is a great player. Really loves like Wurlitzer and organ and like more traditional. He's not much of like a computer mastermind where he's programming stuff. He wants to actually play an instrument. When he's more of a player than he is like the so what I call the evil genius, programmer.
Yeah, I could really feel on Make No Mistake. It feels like there's, that heavy influence and, that old school feel. It's, yeah, because a lot of keyboard people they're heavily into technology, but this is just really good old school, great feeling on that track as well.
Yeah. And a keyboard can make such a difference. I think if you saw the Beatles documentary Get Back,
Mm.
just the difference Billy Preston himself made when he started, those songs sounded like a mess. And then all of a sudden he plays and like, nope, that's the song I know now. Now he was a good, well placed keyboard part can change an entire identity of a song.
Wow, yeah, Get Back. That is unmistakable. That is just like etched in our minds. And he made that. It's like, and you feel that influence here and throughout the whole record. Aside from Sam Burse, you got Logan Todd on drums. Uh,
Yeah.
been playing with you for a while.
Logan played with us for about 3 years. He's not playing with us now. Like I said, this recorded in 2019. We played with us 3 years. He's a Memphis kid and really did a good job on this. We went for a real dry drum sound, not a lot of reverb. Really wanted to feel like the drummer's sitting right in front of you. You're 2 feet from the drum kit. We intentionally went for that sound. I think it really worked well on this record.
Yeah, it's really the bass for a lot of tracks. And a lot of people don't know there's the guy in the back, but it really drives it. You're driving from the back, like the guy in the fire engine is driving from, you're steering it and you're in the
Yeah,
back
yeah.
there. It makes everything, and it's just definitely enhances the record so much. Are you getting out there and doing a lot more live performing now that we're emerging out of the pandemic? How's
Uh,
live performing going for you?
it's not quite back to normal, I wouldn't say, but it's heading that direction. So 2021, we probably did about half of the normal schedule we do, which we do most years between 65 and 80 shows. This year it's been starting a little slow, but we're going to hit here in a couple weeks, April, and then we're going to be pretty busy April through September, October. So even in that, it won't quite be back to normal, like a normal schedule, but it's going to pick up here pretty quick.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've been talking with a lot of artists through this, and you're making the money through touring and getting out there and doing the live shows. So that's been really hard. And have you been doing any like the Facebook lives or stuff on Twitter live to get people to, maybe go through one of those pay services so you can make a few bucks?
We did at first, but I have a little bit of a philosophical difference with it, because the pay is so low.
Yeah.
So somebody's giving $3, $5. In a way, it's like I'm giving the product away. And if I keep giving the product away, it's going to cheapen it. So we stopped doing those pretty early on in the pandemic. Now I did some stuff like we did a family show. So like it was me and my kids all did a show together. We did some stuff like that. But as the band, we kept that brand a little protected from doing any of those after probably 2 months in.
Yeah, yeah. It's been just so difficult, and it's nice to see that maybe we're emerging out of this, and people are going to get back out there on the road. If you do tour, do you go all over the country? Obviously, you've been on the other side of the globe doing that album over there. What was that experience like? Just basically, performing overseas.
We love it. We do really well over there. We've headlined pretty major festivals in Europe. So we've been to Europe uh, quite a few times, numbers of times. And then we did the Armed Forces. We've done a couple tours with the Armed Forces Entertainment in the Middle East, Africa. As far as touring in the United States, we go everywhere, Eastern Seaboard, all the way down to Florida, all the way up to Canada. And then we go west. We've probably never been any further west than like El Paso.
Oh,
Um, just because you get into those states where there's so much land and not very many venues. And so we play Texas quite a bit. And so we cover a big portion of the United States when we tour. Yeah.
yeah, and really tough right now with gas prices. If you're doing the old touring bus, some people are losing money that way. And it's like you want to get out there, you want to perform, but you also like to do a little bit of a profit too, as well.
Right. We I can't lie and say that we're not taking that into consideration. Like when we take gigs, we've a little bit changed our pricing structure to where we're taking a smaller honorarium, but we're saying that plus gas because we don't know what that's going to be. We used to like obviously fold that variable in, but now it's so unpredictable. We're like, we're going to let you have that variable and we're going to take a small, you know what I'm saying? You take
Oh
that
yeah.
variable, we'll take this one. And so whatever that ends up being, and if that ends up working out to their benefit, awesome, good for them. But I right now don't want to have to deal with, because it's pretty volatile at this point. I mean, if
Oh
the thing with
yeah.
Russia ends tomorrow, prices go back down. If it carries on for years, it could double. Like I just don't want to handle that variable. I'd rather let the venue handle that.
Yeah, that's so true. And when you go to venues, how does that work? If you book yourself in a venue, do they take a certain cut? How do you go around and do you do all this work, or do you have somebody booking you in these places?
We do everything internal. I don't do a lot of the booking. Barry does that. But we've been pretty successful. We normally do a flat fee. We get a flat fee, and then we keep all our merch sales, and then the venue takes whatever's on top of that. So it works out best for us. Obviously, in that case, the venue's taking a little more risk because they could end up losing money. But at the same time, we can't come back if they sell it out and complain because they made, you know, if they whatever they if they made 10 times our honorarium, well, that was the deal. So, and we've seen it work both ways. More often than not, they do pretty well for themselves. But
Yeah. And it must help to have the MBA. You have a more of an under. You can't say that about a lot of musicians. It's nice to have that.
no, but I went back to college, kept going back because of to cover mistakes. So I'd make a mistake in business, and then I'd be like, I want to learn more about that. And then I'd make a mistake, and I want to learn more about that. And so it wasn't because I didn't walk into it knowing a lot. I just over time learned by trial and error, and then going back when I would make an error and going getting more education and more knowledge.
So any given shows, you got about 75 originals, and you got a lot more covers you could do too. What are some of the covers that you like to do live?
Well, on our, we just did a covers record, and so we do a lot of those. So we do everything from like "All for You" from Sister Hazel to "Serve Somebody" from Bob Dylan. One of my favorite covers we did is "No One Is to Blame." You remember the Howard Jones
I
song?
love that. I saw him
Um,
once. Yeah.
did you really?
Yeah. I saw him back 1989 when he released, what is that, Cross the Line tour?
Yeah, yeah. So
Saw
we do a
him.
really
Yeah.
interesting funky version of "No One Is to Blame." We do "Love Song" from The Cure, and then once again a really funky version. We do a great, I think, a great version of "Whipping Post" from Allman Brothers, "Everyday People." We obviously do some Prince stuff. We do "Let's Go Crazy" at halftime. "Let's Go Crazy," and then we'll occasionally, when I feel like it, we'll pull out "Purple Rain." And we'll do like speaking of NXS, we do Bonnie Raitt's version of "Need You Tonight." If you've ever heard Bonnie Raitt's version, we
Oh
do that version
yeah,
of.
yeah. She does some good covers too. She covered
Yeah,
Jerry Rafferty too as well, who I love. Yeah, it's just, yeah, I love those songs. Yeah, she did a great version.
yeah. So we do her version of that song, and then we do some Billy Preston. We do "We'll Go Round in Circles," some the band, Joe Cocker.
Hmm.
We
Excellent.
even do a really slow halftime version of "The Way You Make Me Feel" from Michael Jackson.
Nice, nice. Another great tune. Your presence, your what is your website to let everybody know where we
It's
can find you?
jasonleemckinney.com.
Excellent. And you got a YouTube channel as well. You're into doing some videos.
Yep, Jason Lee McKinney TV.
Excellent, excellent. It's fantastic. How do you feel about making music videos? Do you I mean, musicians sometimes are just like, I just want to mix the record, get it out there, perform. I'm not an actor. I'm not into doing this kind of thing.
Well, if you'll notice, if someone watches our videos, they're almost all performance based, or we have a new
Mm.
one coming out that's animated. That's all animated. But I did acting in one video, and I discovered that I'm not an actor. So after that, I was like, you know what? I don't mind if we have actors in it, but I'm gonna just do the performance thing or not be in it at all. So I don't mind doing videos as long as I don't have to act.
Yeah, it comes naturally to certain ones. I've noticed that rappers can make that cross into acting and can take on pretty big roles in movies. But like
Right.
certain people who are just musicians, they're like, oh, please don't don't make me dance and act. It's like this is, it's enough to put this all together.
Right. Right.
So true. So, are you Bonfire Records? Where does that name come from that you're releasing this on?
That is a record label. They are a sister label of Pine Castle, which is one of the largest bluegrass labels. And so it's their Americana sister label. And so great folks there. This will be our fourth record with them, and they're
Good.
hugely supportive of us.
Excellent. Excellent. It's a great new album. Let everybody know where this is at, and just best wishes to everything that you do. It's a really incredible album. It's very, very funky, very deep, philosophical, and I highly recommend it to everybody.
I appreciate that. It's on all the, you can get the album on iTunes, or you can stream it on Apple, Amazon, Deezer, Spotify, YouTube Music. It's everywhere. If you type in One Last Thing, Jason Lee McKinney Band, it'll pop up.
Excellent, excellent. You know, are you one of those musicians who follows the numbers, or just like, hey, I put the product out there, I'm on to the next project?
I don't think anymore someone can afford to just put it out there and not pay attention. You almost have to try to figure, because it's, the world has changed where you used to try to get radio stations to play your stuff. You were trying to convince a person. There was a an MD or a programmer there that you were trying to get to convince your stuff is good. And so there was, of course, bribery and all that stuff that went on with, like, all those years ago. But you were still trying to get a person to listen and enjoy it. Now you're trying to trick a computer algorithm. There's no person back there. And
Yeah,
so because you're trying to trick a computer algorithm, you have to pay attention to it. And it's a little bit more soul sucking than it was before, even because you're like, I'm not actually trying to convince a person this is good. I'm just trying to trip this lever in this computer algorithm that will then spill it out into all the people who should hear it. And so the one thing I would say, encourage other people, is don't take it personal, because it's not even a person rejecting you. It's literally binary code. It's ones and zeros that you have to figure out how to manipulate so that you can get it to people's ears. Then
yeah,
they can tell you whether they like it or not. But the first barrier now is getting through that computer algorithm.
yeah. What a challenge! It's so much different. You want to see the countries you're being streamed in. It's like, are there real people behind that, or are there bots? I mean, I don't know if you could
Right.
even tell. It's really tough.
It is. It's a whole new world, not to quote Aladdin, but
Totally. Well, best wishes, many more albums to come and extensive tours. And just thank you for your time.
thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Take care. Hear
All right.
from you soon.
See ya.
Bye bye.